Let's go live now to Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. Elon Levy is there, former Israeli government spokesperson and host of Israel State of a Nation podcast. Elon, a very good morning to you.
An excellent morning to you, Mike.
Yes, fantastic to see you there. Fantastic to see the people there celebrating finally some news that they've been waiting for 738 days. Tell us a little bit about the atmosphere there.
Everyone here is one big blubbering mess. The square has been packed since before dawn. Israelis have been up all night waiting for the hostages to come home. And we're swinging between cheering for joy, spontaneous singing, and people really crying their hearts out. For 2 years, Israelis have been waiting to see the hostages return. There's a big whoop behind me. Let's see what's happening now. We know that 7 have been released back to the IDF. We're expecting another 13 live hostages. You're on TV. Yeah. 13 live hostages are going to be released in the course of the day, and we're expecting bodies as well. So it's going to be a very difficult day of mixed emotions.
It really is, because we understand that some of the families are not sure whether their loved ones are still alive. They're not sure which, which group they will be in, if you like.
Well, Hamas has given a list of the 20 hostages it says are alive, and that ratifies Israel's assessments based on its intelligence. 20 of the hostages are alive. Another 28 were murdered in captivity or on the day they were abducted, and Hamas took their bodies. Hamas is going to claim it doesn't know where some of the bodies are. The families fear it's going to try to hold on to some of those hostages as bargaining chips for the next war. It's going to be a very difficult process ahead. But right now, the families are about to see the hostages. We've had a really incredible development. Some of the hostages who are still in Hamas captivity have been allowed to have FaceTime calls with their families. So they're getting images of them speaking to their families from inside Hamas captivity. A day of incredibly intense emotions. Let's remember, President Trump is landing in just a few hours to speak in the Knesset. And tonight is the 2-year anniversary, according to the Israeli calendar. What are we seeing behind us now?
Yeah, I mean, it is quite...
The hostages are now... Mike, let me give you an update. The hostages are now officially... You're on TV. Say hello. The hostages are now officially inside Israel, just moments away from being reunited with their families.
Wow. What an extraordinary day. And I mean, in all of your time speaking to me, Elon, did you ever think this day would come?
Personally, no. I was among the pessimists who thought this day would never come. I thought Hamas was going to hold on to them as insurance to survive the barbaric war that they started. And a lot of credit goes to President Trump for getting the Turks, the Qataris, who are Hamas's patrons, their state sponsors, on board to finally put pressure on Hamas to end this war. Look, let's see what condition we're going to get the hostages back in. We know one of them is coming back partially blind. We know some of them have been through the most horrific forms of torture. Say hello, you're on TV. Some of them have been through the most horrific forms of torture. But the important thing is they're alive and they're being reunited with their families.
Yes. And I guess they're going to be going to hospitals, I think, in Tel Aviv shortly after meeting their families to be examined and to be treated. I mean, you've seen other hostages being released. It's not an easy time for them, is it? Because we can't expect them to be in anything other than pretty poor health.
Right. It has been 2 years of being held in the most horrific conditions, underground, starved, tortured, abused. Many haven't seen sunlight in over 700 days. They get an initial medical check in the field. Then they're going to be taken to a nearby military base where they'll be able to freshen up. And then they will be put on helicopters and taken to hospitals around the country. And I expect that very soon we will see a helicopter passing right above this square to a nearby hospital in Tel Aviv, which will be an incredibly moving moment for the crowd here to see a helicopter with hostages right above our heads.
And what has it been like for you in Israel? Because ever since, from before October the 7th, 2023, I mean, you've been bombarded with rockets every single day coming in from Gaza. I mean, since the ceasefire kicked in, has that stopped?
On TV. The ceasefire has come into effect, and I have to say, long before the ceasefire came into effect, Israel did a bloody good job of destroying Hamas's missile capabilities. If on October 7th, Hamas fired 7,000 missiles, 5,000 missiles at Israel. On the 2-year anniversary, they were barely able to muster one. So the fighting has stopped. There are no more missiles, but we know that Israel is still surrounded by enemies that want to destroy it. There are still the Houthis in Yemen. Their slogan is officially death to Israel, curse the Jews. They still have ballistic missiles. And so just because the war on the Gaza front is over for now, it doesn't mean peace is breaking out in the Middle East. Israel is still surrounded by really barbarian terrorist armies that still want to destroy and murder everyone in this square and everyone in the country.
And as far as the peace summit is concerned in Egypt, we understand Mohammed Abbas is going to be there from the Palestinian Authority. What's he going to be saying about taking over the West Bank and possibly Gaza? And how do you keep Hamas out of the way?
Well, I have no idea what he's planning. The fact is that half of Gaza is still governed by Hamas. The Hamas terror state is still standing at the end of this war. It is refusing to disarm. It is refusing to demilitarize. It is refusing to de-radicalize. And that puts the future of the Trump peace plan in doubt. We're getting the hostages out. That's critical. But let's be in no doubt. Until Hamas lays down its arms, until those tunnels are destroyed, this crisis isn't really over. And that's why we need global pressure now on Hamas to see the full implementation of the Trump peace plan. Everyone in this square wants this to be the last Gaza war. But if Hamas is not disarmed, there will be a next Gaza war. It will be worse, and nobody wants that.
No. And as far as Hamas and their sort of manpower is concerned, I mean, do they still have as many people fighting on their behalf? Do they still have as many leaders in Gaza as they did have?
Yeah, Israel eliminated the entire top brass of the Hamas leadership. But they still have soldiers. Look, we know over 20,000 Hamas terrorists have been killed, but they're recruiting. What Hamas did was it hijacked aid trucks sent by, thank you, the British government, hijacked aid trucks, sold it, raised money, and used it to recruit new soldiers, including child soldiers. So Hamas is now showing a real show of force. It's cracking down on the street. It has been executing opponents on the streets of Gaza. It has no intention of giving up power. It is intending to reinforce its authoritarian terror state inside the Gaza Strip and to survive this war that it started in anticipation of the next one. That can't happen. Pressure now. If Keir Starmer does one thing in Egypt, beyond being there to cheerlead, it is to join the efforts to pressure Hamas to lay down its arms so we can finally put this conflict behind us.
Well, Marco Rubio says, as the Secretary of State, that the recognition of Palestine by Keir Starmer and by Emmanuel Macron, by Mark Carney, actually, you know, almost derailed the peace talks. And so, you know, up until now, Keir Starmer hasn't really done anybody any favours in Israel.
No, Keir Starmer, Mark Carney, Emmanuel Macron did worse than not contribute to the peace process. They actively sabotaged it at just the time that we needed pressure on Hamas to come up with its arms above its head and surrender. They were giving Hamas a reward for the October 7th massacre. And Starmer can't say he wasn't warned. Hamas had said a recognition of a non-existent Palestinian state is one of the fruits of the October 7th massacre. We can't get out of this war with Hamas feeling vindicated by the decision to go to war, thinking it was a good decision all along to burn people alive in their homes, to take hostages, to conduct the most horrific atrocities at a music festival, and then to wage that war from civilian clothes under civilian buildings. That's what recognition of the Palestinian state does. It tells Hamas, good job, we're going to give you a reward. So I think this is a moment for a lot of introspection, or should be for a lot of Western leaders. What was Trump able to do right by putting pressure on Hamas? And if we can't help, how at least do we get out of the way and stop causing more damage?
Yeah. That would be good. Just as we speak, Elon, we're seeing some hostage, the vehicles containing the hostages just driving through from the Gaza Strip, presumably to the southern Israeli military base. The 7 hostages believed to be inside 3 cars, I think, hopefully very, very soon reunited with their loved ones. It's quite a remarkable thing to see.
It really is. It is a historic day. And everyone in this country is going to remember exactly where they were as the news came out that the living nightmare we have been enduring for the last 2 years is coming to an end.
Yeah. Let's talk to LaDona Harvey, though, Arizona Morning News star over there in Phoenix, because Donald Trump is about to address the Knesset at some point in the next half hour, we think. He's having quite the day of it. He's arrived in Tel Aviv. He's flown into Ben Gurion Airport. There's a huge sign on the beach at Tel Aviv saying, "Thank you, Mr. President." Quite a remarkable day, really. LaDona, very good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
I mean, even Hillary Clinton has actually given him credit. I mean, this is quite extraordinary. Have a look at this.
Significant first step, and I really commend President Trump and his administration, as well as Arab leaders in the region, for making the commitment to the 20-point plan and seeing a path forward for what's often called the day after.
So, you know, they said hell would freeze over before you saw that. Well, hell must be pretty cold today.
A little bit chilly, yeah. You know, it's interesting. I was talking to a former national news analyst who is kind of free range now, named Chuck Todd, on Friday. And he said, you know, there are two places where Donald Trump's bluster doesn't flip people out. World leaders who will actually, you know, they actually take him very seriously and they listen to him.
Right.
And that's the Middle East and Russia. And he said, you know, you have to give credit where credit is due. Walking in and saying you are going to make a deal is a situation that I don't even, how much diplomacy have we had? You know, we've tried diplomatic routes. We have tried appeasement. We've tried almost everything to calm things down in the Middle East. And somehow, some way, our president managed to at least get the underpinnings of a peace deal done. I mean, we are seeing hostages released. We are seeing troops pulled back. Hopefully we will see people in Gaza fed. We will see kids going back to school, and we will see some sort of rebuilding. And that's something that nobody has managed to do. And, you know, how did he get it done? I have no idea. Nor do I care, to be honest.
No.
I think it's like, who cares how he got it done? He got it done. And we can finally see a calming of the waters there and some sort of resolving of a situation that for the past quite a few years has just been incredibly volatile. And can we take that volatility out of it?
Yeah, exactly right. And the fact that he did get agreement from all of those Arab countries, I think, is quite remarkable, because that's the key to it all, isn't it? And the fact that he also kind of bypassed in his thanks last week Britain, France and Canada, because they did what Secretary of State Mark Rubio said was actually damaging to peace talks. That Hamas basically pulled out of the peace talks the day that France decided to recognise the Palestinian state.
Well, it's, you know, that's such a thorny problem, and it makes Israel mad when people step in. It makes the Palestinians mad when people step in, although they want people to step in. They just want them to step in on their terms. And I think Donald Trump just sort of stepped in on his terms and said, you go to that corner, you go to that corner, everybody shut up, and here's how this is going to work.
Yeah.
And you know, with me, I'm like, I know you are, but what am I? Don't tell me what to do. But somehow, some way, Bibi Netanyahu and Hamas have sort of retreated to their respective corners, realizing that this situation has been untenable, absolutely untenable, and could not go on.
The other one that's interesting over the weekend with regards to sort of US-UK relations is, I don't know how much you know about it, but the UK government is currently embroiled in this scandal about a spying a situation regarding two British citizens who were supposedly spying for China. The case was brought against them by the Crown Prosecution Service, effectively the Attorney General here, and the case had to be dropped because they couldn't get any cooperation from Downing Street with regards to referring to China as the enemy and dangerous and a threat. And the US, we understand, the White House has now warned the UK that, you know, if this is how you're going to treat China, we might have to pull back with some of our intelligence information that we give you.
Well, yeah, China gets treated with kid gloves because let's face it, they're one of the manufacturing behemoths in the world, and everybody tiptoes very gently around them. However, they are also have a horrible human rights record, and their kind of lock on those rare earth minerals that are needed in so much for computing and in the making of silicon chips, in AI, in all of the technology that we are all depending on, that lock and their resistance to selling those minerals very specifically to the United States is really the number one reason I believe that Donald Trump is very unhappy with China right now, and he's going to be really unhappy with anybody who's appeasing them.
And they're not going to be too happy with the 100% tariffs that he's about to put on them either. But
no, and I think it's even more. I want to say that I think it's 130.
Right.
It's
amazing.
It's a lot.
But I mean, there's a good story, pro-American, I suppose, story in the Wall Street, in the Financial Times this morning, saying Wall Street investment bank revenues are set to top $9 billion. Apparently for the first time, getting back up to previous levels, still not as high as 2021, but an increase of 13% from a year ago, 50% improvement on the lows of 2023, when, of course, old sleepy Joe Biden was in charge.
Well, it's interesting because, pretty much everybody on Wall Street, when they saw the tariffs going in and this tariff war breaking out, and I'll be honest, as your average American, I was flipping out over the tariffs going, wait a minute, what's going on? And nothing happened that Wall Street and regular old economists predicted. The American economy did not tank. It hasn't been moving a lot recently, but it certainly hasn't been going down. And so I think that there are a lot of people with tweed suits on and elbow patches who are going to have a lot of explaining to do as to why our economy did not tank with all the tariffs. And if it didn't tank, can we explain that to the American people? Because anybody who's invested in Wall Street is pretty happy right now. Of course, that could change.
Yeah, of course it could. Yeah, I mean, don't count your chickens, as they say, literally. Let's talk now to Martina Bett, political correspondent at The Sun, because she's going to tell us about what's on page 10 this morning. Rod Liddell on a Monday, and of course it's all about China. And Rod says China is indeed a threat to the UK, and it is to Keir Starmer as well. Martina, very good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Mike. And Rod Liddell's column in The Sun today hits right at what I think is becoming a full-blown China scandal for the Labour government right now. And as you say, Rod's warning is quite simple, that China is a threat, not a partner. And he says the Prime Minister is refusing to face up to that reality, really.
Yeah, he is. And also, the more they doth protest, as they say, the worse it looks, doesn't it? Because we've now been told three different versions of events, like all political scandals. It's the lies that eventually, the cover-up that gets you. The CPS quite clearly have said that they did not get cooperation from Downing Street when they wanted to prosecute these two spies. They wanted to have information which said that China was a threat, that China was indeed the enemy, and that this was dangerous activity that they were getting people to do on their behalf. And meanwhile, you've got Bridget Phillipson yesterday saying Jonathan Powell definitely didn't get involved in what she described as the detail of the case, which all sounded like a little bit of a lawyer's excuse for what he actually did.
Yeah, it's quite crazy the way that the point is changing by the day, and I think for the past 2 weeks they've been able to avoid quite a lot of scrutiny because Parliament wasn't sitting, whereas today we are back in Parliament. There would be a lobby briefing with the Prime Minister's spokesman, so there would be lots of questions. As you say, the CPS has now confirmed they spent months asking the government to confirm that China was a national security threat.
Yeah.
And the government simply refused. So, of course, it was that refusal that collapsed the entire trial. And I think one of the points that Rod Liddell makes in his column today is I think he gets to the point of it, which is, imagine if this had happened the other way around. If a British spy got caught in China, he says he would be executed. But here, our government dropped the case and blamed it on, legal technicalities when, frankly, does not stand up to scrutiny.
No,
and what's quite interesting, I was speaking to a former diplomat who's worked on China for the last 2 decades, and he was going to testify for the prosecution during the trial. And I spoke to him last week, and it was quite interesting what he told me, because he said that if the government had decided to go against what, the government is saying that he couldn't say that China was a threat because under the previous government, it wasn't a threat, so they couldn't change it. But actually, let's imagine they'd done so, and the reason why they didn't is because they were scared of repercussions from China. Charles Parson, this former diplomat, told me, actually, it would have made lots of noise, but essentially it would have amounted to nothing, because China, like most authoritarian states, they can sniff weakness and then they go for it. And actually, all the nations that have been in the doghouse with China, their exports have gone up. During the golden era, Britain's exports to China were at the highest, whereas now they're not. So it's very interesting questions that the government needs to answer today.
Well, also we're told by a piece of the Telegraph this morning that senior economists and politicians have sounded an alarm because there's hundreds of billions of pounds in UK debt, which is basically owned by China. And so the more debt that they own of ours, the more they can control what it is the government does.
Yeah, it's shocking. And there was also this other revelation at the weekend that I thought was, again, very shocking. And it was Xingye, the Chinese owners of British Steel, that apparently, according to the Sunday Times, they offered to waive the 1 billion compensation claim if the government gave the go-ahead for the Chinese embassy, the one in central London that the Community Secretary, now Steve Reed, is meant to approve in the next few months. And, we're very much in the territory of the sort of quid pro quos, Chinese investment and influence seemingly traded for political goodwill. It's just shocking. And as I say, in the next few days, the pressure will be on the government. They've got to answer lots of questions. Will they be able to do that? Or will they, or the scandal will keep going and more reports will keep on coming? Because actually, we've seen that there are a few cabinet ministers that I don't think are particularly happy about this. There were reports, anonymous reports, of cabinet ministers blaming the Prime Minister and National Security Advisor Jonathan Powell. So I think this bad sentiment is just going to keep coming.
Well, exactly right. And we're told there might be an emergency question. Parliament's back today for the first time since all the conferences took place. And there could be an emergency question tabled about this very point.
Yeah, I think there will be. There will definitely be an urgent question. We know that the Commons Speaker as well, who will be the one who will grant the urgent question, was not particularly happy about what happened. And when it was first reported that the case had collapsed, he said that the government needed to answer lots of questions. And at the time, we didn't even know that the CBS had asked for that material. This was like a month or so ago. And the Commons Speaker was not happy. So we'll definitely see some action in Parliament, and we'll see how the government does.
And Keir Starmer, of course, not there today because he's gone to Egypt to take part in peace talks. A lot of people wonder why he's done that. He likes to go abroad when there's trouble at home, so I guess he might stay there for as long as he can. A momentous day yesterday, Harry, wasn't it? Watching those incredible scenes in Hostage Square. Incredible sort of the art of the deal by Donald Trump. I mean, really sort of just absolutely 100% going for all of it, standing there like the king of the world. Yeah,
having every sort of world leader except Netanyahu at that Egyptian summit. Basically, queuing up to lavish praise on it, trying to bask in his glory as well. And this deal would not have happened without Donald Trump. No. So everyone else saying, "Oh, we played a role in this, so we had a backseat for it." No, you didn't. No, you didn't. There's one guy that got this done through his completely unique diplomatic skills, which involve business, and everyone's going to school. Oh, what about you're using business? Yeah, people come to the table when there's money involved. That's why the Gulf states they want peace in the Middle East, so they make more money. He brought Netanyahu to heel. This guy's a hardliner. He's got even hardliners around him. Getting him to accept the terms of a pretty unpalatable deal, actually. If you look at it, the number of hostages released, live hostages released, 20, which is over 2,000 Palestinian. A lot of them, a lot of Palestinian prisoners released in the past went on to be key figures in Hamas. So it was not a great deal, but at least it's done. And obviously Hamas. Now, obviously, what we're going to see now is we've done the top of the deal. Now we need to do the bottom of the deal, which is routing Hamas out of Gaza. Goodbye. Get out. You're not coming back. decommission your arms, get rid of your rockets, put down your guns. That's when it's going to get tricky.
Yeah, that is when it's going to get tricky. We'll come back to Starmer in a minute because I want to talk about Mark Thatcher. A big piece in the paper today, all about his mother. Because a lot of people have been talking about Margaret Thatcher, the 100th anniversary of her birth. I mean, the Tory party seemed to be haunted by her in some way, shape or form. You know, they had pictures of her up at the conference. They had dresses of hers that she used to wear on display. It's almost like they're sort of clutching at something.
Yeah,
they don't quite know what it is.
Back to mummy with the comfort blanket, isn't it?
Sort of is. That's how it feels. A bit weird.
Yeah. Well, listen, its timing was fortuitous because it was obviously it was the 100th anniversary of her birth. There was a big old bash last night at the Guildhall in London, which had the sort of great and good of the right-wing establishment, all of her old living, anyone still alive that was in her cabinet, lots of Tory bigwigs and the like. Boris Johnson was there. Joan Collins was there, bizarrely.
I don't think she was in the cabinet, was she?
I don't think she was in the cabinet. It would have been a bit different if she had been. She had a little light glamour to the... I actually, I stopped her to ask her... I was doing a couple of interviews outside, and I made the fatal mistake of saying, Ms. Collins, can I have a quick word? Yeah. And she turned to me and death stared me and said, "It's Dame Joan."
Brilliant. Fantastic.
Yeah, put me in my place. Yeah. No, so Mark Thatcher hasn't spoken since 2009. He gave some brief remarks when his mother died. Obviously, he has had some controversies over the years. But no, it was fascinating to hear him talk about what he thought his mother would think of the world right now. And,
well, let's have a look at one of the clips. This is what he said about Nigel Farage.
What would your mother have made of Nigel Farage and his particular style of politics?
My mother would have respected him for his beliefs, without a shadow of a doubt. He is a politician. Whatever you say about him, he's a belief politician. And that is a good thing. I mean, as long as we're allowed to have a debate in our society about the beliefs that we hold, it can only be a good thing. He believes strongly about it. My mother would have agreed with his views about the size of illegal immigration today, and she would have wanted to tackle those issues.
And since Trump's very much in the news, he also gave his views on what she would have thought about the Donald. Have a look at this.
She would think it's extremely important that they have their own beliefs, and that's very, very important. And clearly, President Trump believes strongly in the market economy. He has very clear ideas of what he wants to do and how he wants to do them. So in that regard, the fact he has got the common beliefs, and she would very much have subscribed to the bulk of them, I would think that she would be admiring his leadership.
It's funny, in a way, you wonder whether she might have been the one person who would have been able to kind of control Trump. You know, she really sort of handbagged him.
I think, I was talking to Professor Andrew Roberts last night. There's some more clips coming out later on. So I spoke to a lot of people last night about what what Mark Thatcher said and what and Professor Andrew Roberts, great mind. He said, Margaret Thatcher would have had exactly what you said. She would have met his match. He would have met her match. No, he would have met his match with her. There we go. Obviously, she had that incredibly good relationship with Ronald Reagan. Arguably one of the most successful US presidents. Brought the Cold War to an end. I think, I suspect they're kind of onto something. And I thought it was really interesting. He said there, about Nigel Farage, is that this is kind of what every sort of Tory politician, says privately, isn't it? That like the guy believes in something. He's authentic. Yeah. He's got that, and even if you don't agree with it, or if you do agree with it, but don't necessarily agree with if you agree with the symptoms or agree with the problems, but don't necessarily agree with the solutions, where he's coming from with Farage, and I think that's really bad for. For the Tories. I mean, he was kind of lukewarm on Kemi Badenoch. He said, look, she's doing her best.
Well, that's the problem.
Doing her best in a bad situation. But what he did say is that he sees remarkable similarities between when his mother took over the Tory party in 1975, country in the doldrums, Tories had just had a massive tonking. She did have a rocky first couple of years to her premiership as well, pre-Falklands. And he said, actually, ignore the polls. You just got to do what's right. Keep going, and he can see the similarities to Kemi's position, but what she fatally, what Margaret Thatcher didn't have, because she was so forthright, she didn't have a right-wing challenger party like Kemi has with reform. So
well, that's
fascinating,
right.
fascinating.
And she also had the ability, I think, to unite her party more easily. Because I mean, Kerry Badenoch came out last week at the conference and said, "Oh, I think we're going to do away with the ECHR finally."
Yeah.
And then half of the sort of shadow cabinet jumps up and went, "Oh, I don't know if that's such a good idea." They don't seem to be on the same hymn sheet.
Yeah. The other thing we really chewed it over is that sort of party unity is very, much sort of weaker these days. But also, well, how would Margaret Thatcher have dealt with the social media age? How would she have dealt with that 24-hour news flow? Would sort of the ideas of Thatcherism, which were those sort of big, bold strokes of strong defence, faith, family, sound money, would that have cut through in the same way? And there's an argument you can have both ways. And, politicians, will we ever see her like again? Perhaps not, because politics is just so different now.
Yeah. There's a lot more people involved now as well. I mean, you've got 7,000 PRs working for the government currently. I mean, I was watching John Redwood talking the other day about how, when he was working closely with her, there was about 3 guys in sort of her inner circle. That was it.
Yeah, no, exactly. And he said, we were talking about his memories of his mother, and he said she used to wake up in the morning and listen to, Farmers Today.
Yeah.
And that's how she'd find out about what's going on at DEFRA. And so it's a completely different world.
Yeah, absolutely.
But no, it's very interesting chat. He's mellowed in his later years, I think, Sir Mark Thatcher, and it's just very interesting to see, there's an argument raging about whether Margaret Thatcher would have voted for Brexit. Remember during the referendum, a couple of her old staff said, "Oh no, she definitely was a Remainer." He scotched all that.
Right.
So he put task to a few.
Brexit's an interesting subject, isn't it? Because it looks as though the government are trying to blame Brexit on all sorts of things.
Well,
we've got
trying to blame Nigel Farage for the state of the economy. People aren't just going to watch it. They think people are mugs.
I know.
They're taking people for mugs. And also, the logic of that is they said, "Oh, Nigel Farage, he got Brexit, and then he just walked away." So what you're saying is you'd rather have Nigel Farage as the Prime Minister than Theresa May. That's the Labour Party's position. You think, and fine, bring him into government if that's what you think.
Exactly.
He's more than happy to serve.
Yeah.
He's more than happy to clear up their mess.
There's no logic.
It's desperate. It's desperate.
I mean, Wes Streeting's quoted in the papers this morning as saying that Brexit is part of the problem, why the economy is so stagnant. Here's what Mark Thatcher told you about the UK economy.
I think that people are being encouraged to come across or half of southern Europe and France and Germany, all those sort of places, to get to the United Kingdom, because when they get here, the prize on the beach is bigger. And my mother used to believe very strongly that before one should one should make a contribution to our society, make a contribution to the nation in which they live, before they should be permitted or allowed to draw upon the benefits of being a member of that society. And I think everybody's got it upside down. We simply have to stop spending in the way we are on social programs. Otherwise, eventually, they will stop. They will have to stop because the arithmetic will simply not allow it anymore. So it's better to do it at a time of your own choice than have it forced upon you. Otherwise, we'll be at the IMF.
It sounds simple when you hear it like that, doesn't it?
It's simpler times, isn't it?
Yeah.
I love that line. He said everything's, compared to his mother's world, everything's upside down.
Yeah.
We're pulling people with, we're basically saying we're going to bankrupt ourselves.
Yeah.
We're going to be heading for the IMF, cap in hand. You can never, ever write in copy in the Sun, the IMF, get a bailout from the IMF without having the words in front. Cap in hand. Going cap in hand to the IMF.
Well, this is the thing, because in the midst of all of this, it's sort of focus on the Middle East and focus on what's been going on in Israel. 2,000 people have arrived, apparently, by small boats in the last 4 days.
That's
right?
the thing. What you're saying is that this isn't a matter of, whether it's right or wrong. It's a matter of simple maths. We are going to bankrupt this country unless we get a grip on spending. And it was very sweet, actually. He used that sort of famous analogy that I don't think he even did it on purpose, but it's just so clearly ingrained into his mind. He used that famous analogy that Margaret Thatcher was used to about a housewife looking after the family purse.
Right.
If Britain was trying to look after the family purse, we'd be in dire straits.
We'd have the
now.
bailiffs round, looking for when you're going to make the payment.
The question is, we're going to have to join the queue at the IMF.
Right.
Does the IMF even have enough money to bail us out?
And then that brings us back to Starmer in the end, because here we have the situation going on with China, which is a massive story, really, which hasn't really quite run out, I don't think. I think it's going for a while. But the basis of it seems to be that Britain is now in hock to China for so much money, they can't afford to upset them because they might want to borrow more.
Might want to borrow more. Might need to, if if you look what Donald Trump's done with China, whacked those tariffs on it, that will have painful effects. I think people just need to level a little bit more with the public. That actually, look, yeah, we are reliant. This is what Labour think. If they genuinely think, look, we've got anemic growth. We're growing at barely 1% a year. We cannot do anything to upset the apple cart. We didn't. The roof hasn't been fixed while the sun was shining. The sun hasn't shone for a very long time. The roof's on fire, in fact.
Yeah.
And there is no headroom.
But the whole building's burning down.
The building's burning down. There's no headroom. There's no rainy day fund. There's no kitty. We're already maxed out the credit card. On debt interest, on massive NHS spending, on 6 million people lying around on sickness benefits that perhaps many of them shouldn't be on, and you just think, just be honest, say that we can't afford to fall out with China, we can't afford to upset America, and I think people would actually have more truck with that than just pretending. Yeah. And say, oh no.
But would people not be really, really angry though if they found out that okay, that's one thing, we can't fall out with China, but you're now actually collapsing a trial in order not to fall out with them.
I always say, if you're not angry, you're not paying attention.
Yeah. Well, I'm always angry.
That's because we're paying attention.
Because we're paying attention. And let's not forget, I mean, Margaret Thatcher's portrait in Downing Street was removed.
That was the way you've annoyed me now, because that was the one question I forgot to ask Mark Thatcher about. Yeah.
Because he didn't want to have a portrait looking down at him, so he said. He seemed to mind him having them at Chequers. He's got a load of portraits there. He didn't take those down.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because every politician has to sort of pay homage to Thatcher and do that sort of. And I remember reading some piece before the election where he was going to use the metal of Thatcher to drive his plan for change or some gibberish some word salad he cooked up.
Well, because they try and come out with these sort of phrases, don't they, that are going to be memorable, and they're just, I mean, it's not working for him. I mean, that scene yesterday in Sharm el-Sheikh, where he thinks he's going to talk, and then he gets completely just minced.
I just think, looking at from where I sit now, which is what 5,000 miles away in Washington, you just look at that and go, these guys, they're just duff. Right. They're just duds.
And the whole thing about
Trump's not very good at it.
No, Trump's day yesterday, I mean, it was so brilliant because we weren't quite expecting it to work as smoothly as it all did. But, 6:30, first word that 7 hostages have been released. The next thing you see is an image of Air Force One coming in to land in Tel Aviv. And you just go, this guy is directing a movie.
No, exactly.
He's not just running the world. I mean, he's filming it.
He's not, he's not a young man, and he's,
he's got an amazing energy.
36 hours, 37 hours, 30 hours on the road yesterday. He did 4 or 5 interactions with the press. It's bizarre. It's the left, the demented left in the States, after having covered up Joe Biden's obvious mental and physical decline, are desperate to get this idea that Trump's gone mad. And you look at this and you just go, yeah.
What are you going to say?
Yeah,
they can't. I mean, even Hillary Clinton had to acknowledge that he'd done a good job. And I mean, I can't wait for his response to that when he sees that she's done that. That'd be tremendous.
No, and tonight he's back in. He's landing. He's in the air now. I think he may be landing any moment. But back to the White House. He's got Milei, the Argentinian president, coming, so that should be lively. And then he's giving the Presidential Medal of Freedom. I think Medal of Freedom, which is the highest medal in the land. Posthumously to Charlie Kirk, the activist. So he's got a packed day as well today. So the guy never stops.
And there's some talk of him having Zelensky there to see if he can solve the Ukraine.
I think he's Zelensky on Friday. So I might I'll let you know about that. I'll patch in.
It might have ended the war in Ukraine by Saturday.
Well, I don't know. I think Putin might be a trickier customer than Hamas.
Yeah. I know. It sounds strange to say that, but you're probably right. Harry Cole, great to see you, as ever. Editor-at-large. We'll see you back soon here, probably on
to the
Zoom.
airport.
Get to the airport. I hope the first-class lounge has been prepared for you.
I wish. I'm not. We're not Jeremy Kyle. Come on.
No, I know. He's got his driver waiting and everything. Should we have another look at it? We might as well. Here he is. Donald Trump suggesting to him that you might want to come up to the podium, but then completely rounding on him and making him look stupid.
United Kingdom. Where's United Kingdom? Where's our friend? Come here. Is everything going good?
Very good.
It's very nice that you're here. These people all came in like 20-minute notice, and I think it's fantastic.
I'm told as well, by the way, that around 2,000 have come on the small boats in the last 4 days alone.
Yeah, it's been quite busy in the channel in recent days. We've, of course, had a few periods of lull, but in general, the numbers are still way above where they were even in 2022. So I think we're still on for a record year. And what we're seeing from the government with this big announcement that they're clearly very excited about, that they've got a coalition of people willing to potentially amend some parts of the ECHR, is that they're looking for another gimmick. Basically, the centre of gravity in British politics on where we need to be in relation to the ECHR, i.e. outside of it, has shifted so dramatically away from Labour that once again they're having to play catch-up. Really underwhelming set of suggestions as to how they'd go about doing this. I mean, how often have we seen in recent years British governments say, oh, we're going to go over and secure a big renegotiation in Europe and it's going to change everything fundamentally. Of course, David Cameron did it in 2015. So I really think this is nothing more than a few headlines that they're desperately trying to seize. And Europe can do whatever they want, to be honest, because we're leaving. We won't be leaving under this government, but whichever centre-right government comes in next to replace this catastrophic one, we will be out. So they can talk about it however much they want, but at the end of the day, I think it's settled in this country now. Yeah,
I think so. Because the point is that the sheer numbers of people who have come to this country have now outweighed the numbers that were ever thought to be coming. And so I think even people who never thought immigration was a problem before now see it for what it is in almost every part of the country.
It is basically a device that is solely being used to prise open Britain's borders, to undermine our sovereignty. And of course, it's not just the ECHR, it's the entrapments that have come along with it under Blairite reorganisations of how our courts work and introductions of things like the Human Rights Act. But the sheer numbers, I mean, you know, closing in on 60,000 now, having come in under Keir Starmer, this is a situation that since it first began in 2018 is actually getting worse 7 years on, rather than in any way abating. So I think the British public have finally snapped on this issue. I think they've snapped for a while, but I really don't see how anything less than the radical decision to leave the ECHR is a way out of this mess that we're in now.
Yeah, and I mean, as you see other countries, as you say, joining in, it's almost as though people have worked out that the ECHR is no longer fit for purpose, which is, of course, what Nigel Farage has been saying for quite some time.
Exactly. Well, I think it's taken far too long for sort of analogue politicians to clock that all the sort of post-Second World War apparatus that was introduced, whether it's the ECHR or the Refugee Convention, has long since served its time. These were things that were introduced in an era of less mobility and less mass communications. So I think it's a long overdue recognition that these things are more albatrosses around the neck of sovereign countries rather than in any means or any sensible way the sort of upholders of human rights. I mean, it was never compatible for Britain to be involved in such a thing anyway. This is something that really only got inflicted on us properly by Tony Blair and his obsession with basically destroying our constitution. But I think we're moving in the right direction on this. I really don't think these sort of Labour sound bites that they've put out in any way actually will address the issue. And a lot of real thought has gone in now, whether it's from the Conservative Party and Lord Wolfson or Restore Britain or the Prosperity Institute, on how we actually go about leaving the ECHR. So I think basically this is the ascendant side of the argument now.
Yes, but there's also an awful lot of talk, and the Tories have started doing it now, about mass deportations. You know, Kerry Badenoch was talking about 150,000 mass deportations a year.
Yeah, which is exciting. I mean, I don't think their plans quite realise the resources that they would need. Don't think 1.6 billion a year is enough, but I also think this is where the conversation is now. People are sick of the very thought of having over 1 million illegal migrants living in this country, putting pressure on public services, undermining really our sovereignty and what it is to be a British citizen. So I think this is an inevitable sort of mainstream centre ground position that politicians and parties are once again having to play catch up with. We know the vast majority of the public in every region of the country want the deportation of every single illegal migrant. So it's something that, again, it won't happen under this government, but it is an inevitability.
Yeah, I think so. You don't want to think about bad cops and how many of them there are. And, you know, I suppose in the scheme of things, you might say it's a relatively small proportion. But are they cracking this, or is it still a problem?
I think they're getting on with it, Mike, and I think we've got to recognise this is 0.005% of police officers. So there's a lot of police officers out there right now who are facing knives and guns, and as we saw at the Manchester synagogue, doing their job and keeping us, trying to keep us safe. But there are a small minority of officers who are wicked and evil, as we see. It's unbelievable, isn't it, that you get officers convicted of child sex offences and the like, rapes. Quite incredible. And the police are cracking down. What gets me sometimes, though, you know, when officers are dismissed for things like WhatsApp groups, these are things, in my view, should be like words of advice. The police are judged, some police officers are judged very harshly. There was a doctor recently who left an operation, left the patient there, had sex with a nurse and then came back. And he put that person's life at risk, and he wasn't struck off. And I just think it's unfair sometimes that police officers are judged like this. One thing I would take from the stats, though, is that 16% of those struck off are ethnic minority officers, and only 8% of police officers are ethnic minority. And it just strikes me that sometimes in their desperation, senior police officers recruit people because they look a certain way when they don't carry out proper vetting and the like. And really, we should be recruiting police officers by how good that person is, not what colour they are or anything else. Let's just have good people in. And those stats don't say that they're not doing that.
No. I mean, looking at the numbers coming out of each particular police department in various different parts of the country, it looks as though, and it may just be a numbers game, it may be because there's more people there, but Greater Manchester seems to have a bigger problem than most. 130 officers barred there in the last 5 years, compared to in most other areas, kind of, you know, much more below 50 in many cases, and certainly below 100 apart from the Metropolitan Police, where it's 502.
Yeah, I mean, the Met is the biggest by 30,000 officers, and Manchester is the second biggest police force in the country, so there's no surprise there. Right. And Manchester Police is led by a very good Chief Constable, Steve Watson, so no doubt they're cracking down. But there has been a massive problem, as you've known in the past, with vetting, not recruiting the right kind of officers. And this is going to happen. These things, if you don't vet people when they come in, this is the consequence. When I joined the police, I was serving in Northern Ireland. The sergeant used to come to your house. In my case, the RUC sergeant came to the barracks and saw me, but that face-to-face interview, they suss you out, see your family and your friends. And then all the interviews I did to join the police were face-to-face. We've had this situation where people are applying online and they're never seen by a person until they arrive at the training school. And it's not really a training school anymore, it's a university where you go home after at 5 o'clock. So all these things lead to problems not being spotted and bad apples getting into the barrel.
Yeah. It is unfortunate, isn't it? And I mean, as far as the police's situation now with regard to these protests, I mean, let's talk about that a little bit. Shabana Mahmood in the papers this morning saying we've lost control of our borders. Only last week she was saying we're going to give the police special powers to crack down on these pro-Palestinian marches. But, you know, no sooner than a couple of days later, after she said that, there was another massive pro-Palestinian march on Saturday, at which the only person that I could see was arrested was a pro-Jewish protester who they said was breaching the peace. And the police officer in question, when he was asked about why he was doing it, he said, I'm just following orders.
Well, I mean, we've heard that phrase before, haven't we? You know, it's in Germany. So it's just terrible. I mean, they arrest firstly why that man was ever handcuffed. What threat was he? What had he done wrong? Quite incredible. I just can't understand that. But the other thing, of course, is that politicians always say we've got new powers. You can have as many powers as you want, but unless you've got enough officers to enforce them, you're not going to do anything with them. So let's look at these cases where the police have cracked down and they've arrested 500 people in one day. That is 500 sets of people who are on bail coming back to the police station, 500 sets of paperwork that got to be submitted, and it just wears the police down. So while they're dealing with that, they're not patrolling the streets, catching robbers, thieves, burglars, rapists, the things that the community would like them to do. And as I say, the politicians have always got a new act of parliament, a new law, but there's never anybody new to enforce it. And what the police need is numbers to deal with these things.
Yeah, exactly right. We've got Shabana Mahmood on the front page of the Telegraph today saying that she's having a big meeting with people from the Balkan countries today in Downing Street. The Balkan interior ministers are all going to join her to try and see whether or not there's anything they can do to stop people moving through their countries. As Carl says, how do we know they're moving through those countries if we don't know who they are?
This is more delusional talk, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Our government haven't got a clue how to stop them. They've been time and time again saying they're going to do this and that, they're going to smash the gang, whatever. The only thing they're doing is smashing their credibility.
Yes.
Even looking at the Palestinians and what's been happening there, already we've sent a message that we're going to welcome however many it is there are 2 million Gazans. There are 5.5 million Palestinians. And the message that's gone out to them is make your way here and we will make you comfortable and we will allow you to stay. That's the message that's gone out. And with regard to those who are coming in through the Balkans, let's not forget that they're actually having got into Europe through the Balkans. They're not making their way directly here. They're going through other EU countries in order to get here. Right. The fact is that we have no control. It's not a case of losing control. We haven't had control of either legal or illegal migration for a long time. And it's time that the government came to terms with this and took on board the fact that they've got to get serious about stemming the tide of immigration that is hitting us.
Yes, because I mean, back in 2018, when it kind of the boat crossings sort of started, I guess there was a very small number at the beginning, wasn't there? And I guess what happened was that the people smugglers got ever more bold and decided this was an easy thing to do, and so they just started carting more and more people across the channel, and which they've been doing kind of in increasing numbers ever since.
Well, in 2018, when it all started, in January, there was something like 7 in one dinghy that made their way across. There were 299 in the whole of 2018, and it's been growing since. It's growing again this year. We're over 36,000 just across the channel. I'm afraid the only reason that it's happening is because it works. If you get yourself here, you're going to get to stay. The Palestinians who came in up to the year to June 24, there were 38. The following year, in the year to June this year, there were 324. The year before, there were 327 who applied for asylum. Last year, or in the course of the past year, there were 141. I mean, all these people are succeeding simply by getting here and applying for asylum. 80% of those who apply for asylum from Palestine are being allowed asylum. But apart from that, even when they're refused, they're not being sent back. What I would say, Mike, is look at what happened after Afghanistan. For those who are saying now, well, we've got peace in the Middle East. Maybe, but it's going to be a hell of a long time before things get back to any sort of normality and have the conditions to persuade people not to leave.
Well, that's right.
It's not going to happen anytime soon, and I'm afraid they will make their way here because we will look after them and they will get to stay.
Of course. Well, I was reading a story just the other day, earlier this week, about a Palestinian woman who I think was in her mid to late 30s, who was being brought to Britain to study at Glasgow University for some nebulous, ridiculous PhD that wouldn't be of any use to man or beast, and she was complaining because apparently she was supposed to be bringing her husband and 3 kids with her, but she was refused entry onto the bus that was leaving Palestine, and this was before the peace deal was even done, because they said there wasn't enough room for the husband and the 3 kids. But so obviously we are giving solace to these Palestinians, not only to them to come here and study, and maybe presumably pay for their tutelage and pay for their living, the cost of living and all of that, but they're allowed to bring their families with them. So that would be 4 or 5 people coming into a country that's already overburdened and already paying through the nose for millions and millions of people who are both homegrown and foreign. I mean, the story today, I think, says 1 in 6 people claiming universal credit are now migrants.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we keep saying what a huge cost this is. And not only is it costly, but what we're doing is we're going to take in any wretched individual, anyone in dire conditions, as they put it. We're going to say to them, you can come here, and the British taxpayer is going to pay for it all and look after you. That is wrong. Isn't it time that Shabana Mahmood, Sir Keir Starmer actually took heed and listened to what the British taxpayer is saying? They want this to stop, and they want it to stop in their name. What is happening at the moment is not something that the British taxpayers are prepared to pay for, to take in. There are 200 million displaced people around the world. As our laws are, and as our courts have now decided, every single one of them is potentially able to come here and claim asylum and be looked after. That is wrong.
Well, exactly right. And in the paper today is pictures of the bloke called Fayaz Khan, as he's known, who's the man that came over on a small boat, filmed himself coming on a small boat, and said on a video on TikTok that he was going to kill Nigel Farage, right? He's from Afghanistan. He was sentenced yesterday for 5 years. Let's have a look at what Nigel Farage had to say after his conviction.
This violent criminal, somebody with 17 convictions in Sweden, in 18 months' time, he will be in this country, living in a house of multiple occupancy or a hotel. He'll be free to walk the streets whilst his asylum claim is being judged. And the only reason we know about this guy is because somebody sent it to me on TikTok. And it makes me wonder, how many other Madapassers are there now in this country, or will there be as the boats continue to cross the channel?
And of course, one, he shouldn't surely be able to continue to claim asylum if he's been convicted for a violent offence which puts him in prison for 5 years. Two, he was apparently sentenced to 8 months in prison already for illegally entering the country. So how is he able to be sent to prison when nobody else is?
Well, what I'm more concerned about is that in 18 months' time, when he's freed and he's able to walk the streets and he applies for asylum, we're going to put him up because we can't allow him to become destitute. Right. We're going to give him £50 a week to await the outcome of his application, and then I wager that he will be allowed to stay because we won't be prepared to send him back to Afghanistan, and I'm sure that no one else will have him. So this can't be serious. It really can't be serious.
It's a joke. It is absolutely a joke. This seems to be now a little bit of a narrative that they're constructing over at Labour HQ, doesn't it? Because Wes Streeting the other day came out with something similar, saying that, you know, we're struggling to fix the economy because of Brexit. I mean, people voted to leave the European Union nearly 10 years ago.
Yes, exactly. I mean, Wes Streeting seems to be a bit the advance guard on this. The word is that Rachel Reeves will, during her budget speech, start trying to blame Nigel Farage and Brexit for having to put up our taxes. As you know, Nigel Farage is really the Chancellor. Rachel Reeves is just a front, and yeah, completely ridiculous. Yeah, the idea that Brexit has harmed the economy, you know, to believe that, you've really got to be incredibly blinkered and not sort of be in touch with what's happening the other side of the channel. Right. If Brexit had harmed our economy, I mean, Britain would be sort of going down the tube while the rest of the EU sort of sailed ahead without us. Whereas, you know, you look at economic growth since we voted to leave the EU, we're about the same as France. Not great economic growth. We've been sort of a bit pedestrian, our economy, but we've grown about the same level as France has. We've grown faster than Germany has. Germany is in the middle of a sort of rather sharp industrial decline. So neither of those countries, I think, have left the EU. So why should you blame Britain's sort of lousy economic performance on Brexit?
Right. Well, it's a very strange situation that we find ourselves in, isn't it? Let me play you this from Rachel Reeves, which she said this morning, because on the one hand, they're saying, oh, Brexit's to blame for the economy being a terrible place. And then here she talks about, you know, possibly being in a doom loop. And then in other public pronouncements, they're trying to make out that everything's fine. Have a look at this.
Our tax rises coming down the track.
Yeah, but I think that this government are making... Sorry. In terms of the ambition of this government, it is big.
But you agreed, yes, there are tax rises coming down the track.
Well, I was really clear during the general election election campaign, and we discussed this many times, I would always make sure that the numbers add up.
Can you promise the British people you're not going to get stuck in a doom loop of having to go through this cycle every year of having to find more tax to fill the black hole?
Nobody wants that cycle to end more than I do, Sam. That's why that is why we're putting all the effort into growing our economy, because that in the end is what brings in the tax revenues to be able to afford to keep taxes low.
So she finishes up with having admitted that we are in some kind of doom loop, and she is going to raise taxes, by at the end saying, I'm going to create growth. Well, sorry, I mean, all of those things, same things can't be true.
No, and, you know, on another day she would be boasting, oh, Britain's got the highest growth rate in the G7. Well, if Brexit's to blame for the economy, well, you know, how come we've got the highest growth rate in the G7? I mean, it doesn't make sense. And Keir Starmer, if you remember his conference speech a couple of weeks ago,
I'd rather not.
Was boasting of, probably not, but he was boasting of how the government had done a trade deal with India and it managed to get a sort of reasonably good deal with Trump and his tariffs. And, you know, of course, he didn't mention the one thing that should actually made these things possible, which is Brexit. You know, if we were still in the EU, we'd be, you know, we'd be thumped by the tariffs Trump imposed on the EU. We wouldn't have been able to do a trade deal with India, which the negotiations for which were begun by the previous Conservative government, by the way. And yet, you know, on another day, they're saying Brexit is to blame for everything. And you know, it just doesn't sort of make sense, does it?
None of it makes sense. No, that was shortly before he sort of encouraged everybody to rise up and fight Nigel Farage, because he was the biggest threat to Britain since, you know, the Normans or something. You know, he's getting very carried away these days. And I mean, I've worked out, I don't know whether you heard any of the show earlier, what's wrong with him. And I don't know whether you ever heard of this particular condition, but mythomania is something I'm thinking about writing about. We think that Keir Starmer may be suffering from it. It's a psychological condition characterised by a compulsive and habitual tendency to lie, often with no clear benefit or motive.
Yeah, so he's not the only politician to suffer from that, let's say.
No, it could be an epidemic. You know, maybe we should try and find a vaccine for it.
Yes, yeah, but let's wind back to the sort of day after the general election, and Keir Starmer was boasting, you know, growth was going to be the absolute priority of his government. And, you know, where are we? We were sort of, you know, we've sort of been bumping along the bottom of the growth has actually sort of, you know, declined. We had a sort of really rather promising situation when the last government left office. Growth had sort of perked up a bit. Employment was growing strongly. And now in the year since, the past year, we've lost 115,000 payrolled positions.
Yeah. I think it's 123 now, actually.
Yes, and I mean, there is a very good reason for that, is that the national insurance hike, employers' national insurance hike last budget increased the costs for employers, particularly for those employing part-time staff, because she reduced that threshold for paying national insurance from £9,100 to £5,000, which brought a lot more part-time workers into the net. Employers, supermarkets and so on, warned her that this would cause jobs to be shed, and that's exactly what has happened in practice.
It absolutely has. James, very good morning to you, sir.
Hello, my friend. I can't believe that video clip you just played, by the way. This guy's meant to be an Oxford student, and he can't even rhyme. Proud and ground do not rhyme. What are they teaching people?
I know. I mean, maybe he could have done it as a haiku or something like that. You know, it would have at least shown that he had some kind of education. I want to tell you this, though. We discovered something brilliant yesterday. I don't know if you were able to hear it, but we've discovered what's wrong with Keir Starmer. We've diagnosed him as suffering from mythomania, right, which is apparently a psychological condition characterised by a compulsive and habitual tendency to lie, often with no clear benefit or motive. That's him, I mean, in a nutshell.
That sounds pretty good. I mean, unfortunately, that's probably not limited to him in the House of Commons. I remember Benjamin Disraeli was once in trouble because he used unparliamentary language and accused half of the House of Commons of being liars.
Right.
The Speaker said, "You've got to take that back." He said, "OK, half of the House of Commons aren't liars." It was very clever.
Very good. I love that sort of, you know, jousting that goes on. You've worked in Downing Street. I mean, can you possibly, with a straight face, tell me that somebody like Matthew Collins, who is a relatively senior civil servant but a junior figure in government, could, by himself, decide unilaterally to not consider the Crown Prosecution Service important enough to give them an answer to a question that they'd asked him, and without any reference to his boss, the National Security Advisor, without any reference to the Foreign Office or indeed to Downing Street or the Prime Minister's office or the Prime Minister himself. He's decided to give an answer to them which allows a case against 2 spies in Parliament to be dismissed.
No. No,
it's a straight answer.
It's completely ludicrous. This is completely insane. And I think it's people who want to dive into some of the weeds on this should follow a great man called Luke de Pulford on Twitter or X about this. Who's I think got to the heart of this, the sort of smoking gun, the idea that this was nothing to do with any of the political people, nothing to do with Jonathan Powell, who is, let's remember, he's a special advisor, he's a Labour person, a Labour figure, or Keir Starmer or anybody else in Downing Street. Because in a version of evidence that this man gave, he gives the Labour government's 3 C's of compete and challenge and cooperate or whatever, which is meant to be the basis of their China policy. So he's essentially used language from the Labour Party manifesto in a newer version of this document that is supposed to be non-political and only based on the assessment of the previous Conservative government. So if that's making people drone off and switch off, let's just get to the heart of this. The government is lying.
Yes.
They are lying through their teeth. And let's always remember, it's not always the crime, it's the cover-up. And I think this will bring heads to roll eventually.
I think there's no question about that. And I mean, I said this morning when Poppy Coburn was in, that, unfortunately, they're trying to kind of, obfuscate and filibuster this story to the point where people just aren't interested, because it is a very confusing and slightly kind of dull actual, revelation that you finally get to. But as you say, right to the point, the bottom line is they've lied about it. And they continue to lie about things. They continue to excuse themselves and fail to answer things. And there's clearly a problem with Jonathan Powell. He is clearly a very important man in our government, and yet he is not answerable to the British public. He's never in front of any committee that I've ever seen, and he's a sort of shadowy figure. This is a guy who sold off the Chagos Islands, after all. This is a guy who was part of Tony Blair's mafia and still part of Tony Blair's mafia. I think he should be gone.
Yeah, absolutely right. No, it's very, very dangerous. It's a guy who's part of something for a long time called the 48 Club, which is, without wanting to libel people, a group of people who are very, 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 very sympathetic towards the Chinese Communist Party. Let's be clear. They are not our friend. As we've discovered from recent revelations, the Chinese Communist Party is the greatest threat to world peace. It possibly could grow into the greatest threat that the world, certainly the West, has ever faced. It's huge, it's powerful, it's rich, it's evil, it's technologically advanced, it has absolutely no scruples or morals at all. It kills and sterilizes people in its own population. It will do anything for more and more power, and we are mad if we don't address this. And as you said as well, this guy Powell, not only is he kowtowing to China, he gave away sovereign British territory that we discovered yesterday is now being carved up along with the Indians, and they're going to put all kinds of listening and communication posts nearby to the American naval base.
Like we said they would,
genius
right?
Idea.
Like we said they would when it was all going through, and we said this must not happen because of that possibility that they will now have an opportunity to put, Chinese, listening devices onto sovereign territory that used to belong to us, where we also have a very, very, top secret base.
Look, I think it's very simple. I know we're very short on time, but the Labour Party, as is currently constituted, hates this country. It's quite simple, really. If you voted for them, I'm sorry. Maybe you could be forgiven for being duped because, my party were a bit useless towards the end. But this Labour Party is not even the Labour Party of Tony Blair, who, for all his faults, did seem to like Britain. Certainly not the Labour Party as was constituted 100 years ago. It is full of people who say things like, "Oh, my stomach churned when I saw us waving the Union flag."
Oh, I know. It's
Labour
awful.
Conference.
Absolutely awful. Let's talk to Mel Stride, Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer. Mel, Matthew Said says that people are going to listen to you if you come up with some decent fiscal promises. Morning.
Yeah, absolutely. And you saw that. Good morning. You saw that at our conference, Mike, where in my speech I set out £47 billion worth of savings. That's getting government spending under control. It's the first down payment on that, particularly around welfare spending, £23 billion worth of savings there. We made it very clear that those savings will be subject to what we're calling our golden rule, which means at least half of those savings have to go to paying down the debt so that we're living within our means, but equally it allows us to cut taxes, and that's why we were able to cut stamp duty or offer a cut on abolishing stamp duty on properties, abolishing business rates on shops and pubs in our high streets. That's 250,000 businesses, and a big bold offer for young people around lower taxes for that first job. So that's what, you know, serious economic policy looks like in terms of moving our country forward from this kind of debt trap we're in into a more dynamic, growing economy.
Well, we've got GDP figures this morning growing 0.1% in the 3 months to August. Somebody pointed out to me that it flatlined pretty much in July. No doubt later on today Rachel Reeves will claim this is some kind of great sign that everything's going well. But in fact, you know, given inflation is going to be rising to something like 3.4%, and the IMF is saying that we're going to have the highest inflation rate in the G7, a small amount of growth like that really doesn't mean anything, does it?
No, absolutely not. And in fact, 0.1% growth in August. It was a 0.1% contraction the month before. And the IMF is saying that in terms of growth per capita, per person, which is the thing that matters when it comes to how well people feel off, they're saying that next year we will have the slowest growth in the G7, and will be below average growth this year. And you're absolutely right about inflation. We have the highest inflation now in the G7. The projections are that that'll be the same case next year, and that's one of the reasons why people are getting poorer. What the government's got to do, Mike, is not be looking to put up taxes in the November budget. They've got to look, as we are suggesting, at controlling spending so that actually we can start to get taxes down and get the economy growing.
Can we talk about this China story? Because it seems to me that Keir Starmer was being, at the very least, economical with the truth yesterday when he talked about a meeting. Let's have a look at this. This is him at PMQs talking about a meeting that took place earlier this year, but nothing happened at it.
There was a meeting in September. That did not involve the National Security Advisor discussing the evidence in any way, nor, Mr. Speaker, one further piece of evidence. The final statement in this case was submitted in August 2025. There was no further submission of evidence, one way or the other, after any discussion in September. This is a red herring, a completely scurrilous allegation made by the Leader of the Opposition.
He thinks it's a scurrilous allegation that basically somehow this government has been complicit in allowing spying to go on inside Parliament by two characters who were engaged by the Chinese government to give information to what can only be described as an enemy state. So, you know, what does he mean, a scurrilous allegation?
Well, I think that's all part of the attempt to cover up what has probably been going on, which is that there was a very clear case and two individuals were charged with spying on our members of Parliament in our Parliament, a clear threat to our national security. Those charges were brought forward when we were in office, and the case collapsed. And you have to ask the question, why did it collapse? Well, it either collapsed because the government wasn't sufficiently engaged in this matter to make sure the threshold for continuing the case was met with the CPS, or they may have acted in a way where they were quite comfortable for the case to collapse because they want to kowtow to Beijing rather than incur their wrath, as they would see it, given the fragility of the economy at the moment and the fact that they are desperate to benefit from China in terms of trade and other matters. So a lot of questions still to be answered. And what we're saying, Mike, is that what they've got to do now is they've released the evidence, the three submissions around that, but they've also got to release the correspondence and the memos around the interaction between the CPS and civil servants and any ministers involved in those discussions, so we can get to the bottom of exactly what happened and why they failed to provide the evidence required for those trials to go ahead.
And is it really credible for Matthew Collins, who is the Deputy National Security Advisor and a civil servant not appointed by the government, is it really credible that he, in his statement, has said basically that he operated entirely alone without any reference to his boss, who is, of course, the National Security Advisor, who is Jonathan Powell, and without any reference at all to Downing Street, without any reference to any media advisors, without any reference to anyone, he just dealt with the CPS on his own. I mean, I just don't believe it.
Well, it just does stretch credulity that the National Security Advisor, who of course is a political appointee, and that is a distinction, should have been completely unaware of what was going on. And if he was aware of what was going on, then why wasn't he involved more than is claimed? Or indeed, was he more involved? And that's why, as I say, we need to see the correspondence, the memos around those interactions between the CPS and Matt Collins, the Deputy National Security Director, that civil servant that you've referred to, and any other ministers that are involved in any way in this situation, because it just feels like there's stuff that's being hidden here. You've got a Prime Minister that one minute was saying, well, we couldn't see the evidence, and then the next minute he's up at the dispatch box saying we can because of the pressure that we've applied. Right. To him. It's moving around a bit, and it just raises more questions.
Well, it does, and I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you this morning was that we discovered yesterday what's wrong with Keir Starmer. We sort of fell upon it by accident, but because he does tell so many lies, and he seems to be unaware of the fact that we remember what he said before, right? And we found out that there's a thing called mythomania, which apparently is a psychological condition characterised by a compulsive and habitual tendency to lie, often with no clear benefit or motive. And we can see that the various kind of symptoms of that are compulsive lying, telling elaborate stories, a lack of a clear motive, and difficulty distinguishing lies. I think he might be suffering from this condition, because he seems to be unaware of the fact that every single time he opens his mouth, he doesn't tell the truth.
I think the biggest thing, Mike, is a lack of backbone, actually. In this situation, if you think about the Angela Rayner situation where she had to resign, you looked at Peter Mandelson, his resignation, you've seen the same pattern, which is somebody who doesn't step in and grip these things. He lets them run, and it's down to others then to apply so much pressure that in the end he steps back and caves in, and that's just, I'm afraid, not a very good quality in somebody who's meant to be leading our country.
Well, it really isn't. It's quite disturbing. Possibly the most unpopular Prime Minister of all time. His latest manoeuvre is to say that the police in the West Midlands have made a mistake by banning fans from Maccabi Tel Aviv to come. I mean, surely to Christ, he could do something about that, couldn't he?
Well, I suppose we're going to find out what the true limits of power of a Prime Minister are, as to whether or not he can actually intervene to allow football fans to go to a match. I mean, it is... frankly, I don't think many members of the Jewish community in the UK are particularly enamoured with the Prime Minister right now. Obviously, this decision wasn't his to make, but I think a lot of eyes are going to be on him to see what the government can actually do and how it is that they actually plan to make Jewish people in this country feel safe. It's a major concern, though, actually. We have to be clear, there's so many more ramifications than simply the optics of Jewish people not being safe in a city, in a major English city in this day and age. If the police, if the local police are genuinely turning around and saying, look, we're unable to police a sporting event in what is still ostensibly England's second city, what does that say about their ability to host all sorts of things, to manage all sorts of other things? If they can't do this at a fairly straightforward sporting event, is that going to affect the city of Birmingham's ability to simply function on any kind of level? If you're genuinely saying foreign people from certain countries are not able to come and people of certain ethnicities are not safe in this city because they risk violence, I mean, just on a performance level, that's a massive indictment on the local police, and it is a massive indictment on the Prime Minister that he's overseeing a country where that can be allowed to happen.
Yeah, exactly right. And also, you know, if their claim is that because they've heard that Maccabi Tel Aviv fans can be a little bit violent themselves because of what happened in Amsterdam, you know, I haven't seen them banning any other football teams from going to Aston Villa or from going to any other place in Birmingham as a result of their reputation. You know, what would they do with Millwall?
I mean, what would they do with Celtic fans? You know, Celtic fans who, whenever they do play in England, and they do play sort of every now and then, are more than happy to sort of chant about the IRA and cause trouble, or Rangers fans whenever they turn up south of the border, are also known for a bit of for a bit of a tear up. Neither of them get banned, because we just have to put up with it. We just have to deal with it.
Yes.
I mean, for heaven's sake, Celtic, I think, played actually in Birmingham last year, was it? And they were chanting about the IRA.
Yeah.
Well, Birmingham was bombed by the IRA. Why on earth is that acceptable?
I know. It's exactly,
Tel Aviv, that's not.
Exactly right. But also, isn't it ridiculously sort of mealy-mouthed? And I mean, I had John Rentoul on earlier saying, well, of course, the Keir Starmer can't get involved in policing issues, policing matters. That's for them, their operational conduct has to be, completely separate from government. Well, it doesn't actually, because the Home Secretary can intervene if she wants to. Shabana Mahmood, she hasn't said anything about it. I mean, he said he thinks it will be resolved later today. I mean, surely somebody with some brains will reverse it and say this is ridiculous.
Yeah, surely, I mean, if nothing else, surely government has the resources to intervene on behalf of West Midlands Police and say, OK, what is it that you need for this actually to go ahead? Where do we have to divert resources from? How is it that we make it safe? But also, we all know that actually police have pretty sweeping powers to intervene to stop people who are known to them from getting involved in violence at football matches, to prevent them from going to areas. What do you need also to prevent those people who you are clearly worried about turning up in the first place? So, I would just think it's going to be a massive failure of our ability to put on fairly basic events if we're not able to do it. And, nobody's saying it's going to be 10,000 Maccabi Tel Aviv fans or something like that. It's a European away game. It'll probably be a couple of thousand. It's not a huge number of people in the grand scheme of things. If we're not able to manage that sort of basic A to B transfer of people to the stadium and back again, and let's be clear, it's not Aston Villa fans that we're being told are the ones that are going to kick off. It's not necessarily going to be in the stadium that there's going to be problems. It's outside. If you're not able to do that, like we do with football matches on a weekly basis in this country, well, what exactly is the point of us if we can't run these things in our own backyard?
No, exactly. And clearly as well, the sense is that the police are once again operating as a two-tier system, because all the decisions that they make, like we can't ban the pro-Palestine protests, we can ban Israeli hooligans from coming to Aston Villa. Which one of those things is right, and why couldn't both the things be banned?
Well, exactly. I mean, the pro-Palestine marches in London have hundreds of thousands of people marching through the centre of London every week, and we're told that that's absolutely fine. But as I say, it'll be maybe 1% to 2% of that number will be arriving in Birmingham. I mean, how it is that you can sort of turn around and say to those people, well, for your safety, you're not allowed to go and do this thing. I mean, what is, as you say, it's two-tier, because what does it show that they're prioritising? They're prioritising effectively the will of a majority in a certain set situation, because that majority threatens to get violent. And I'm sorry, but in a civilized first world society, you draw the line at that. You say, look, I don't care how many of you there are threatening to be violent. That's not what we do here. We don't behave like that in a country like that. If you want to, no problem. Apparently we're very pro-open borders and everybody's allowed to rock up or leave. Very happy for you to go elsewhere and do that sort of thing. There's a raft of countries that are more than happy to let you do that. But here, that is a red line, A. And when it comes to Jewish people in particular, whether or not they have Israeli passports, we don't tolerate that sort of intimidatory tactics being used against Jewish people.
No, exactly right.